Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm your host, Will McFadden. I'm joined by Tori McElhaney and Terrin Waack. We are here to break down a frustrating loss to the Los Angeles Chargers. The Atlanta Falcons, for all intents and purposes, were the better team out there on the field today, and yet they end up with a 17-13 loss inside of Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They fall to 6-6 on the season. They're back to 500, a little bit back to square one. And Tori, I think the biggest thing that we got to start with is the play of Kirk Cousins today. He had 4 interceptions. A lot of them were untimely. What did you see from number 18 out there?
It felt like he was having a hard time seeing what was happening in front of him.
A little bit, yeah.
It felt like the decision-making wasn't there that I think should be there for someone who's a 13-year NFL veteran. And this is not something that I think is new. This is not something that I think is random and just kind of like a bad day at the office. It is a bad day at the office, but this is now 3 games in which this offense has faltered and stuttered and not been able to punch the ball into the end zone. And you have to understand too that the quarterback plays a role in that in all 3 of those situations. Whether or not you can put the blame solely on Kirk Cousins, on his shoulders, I don't think you can do that when you're looking at the last 3 losses just as a collective unit.
Yeah.
But it's really, really hard to say that his role in it wasn't significant when he has not thrown a touchdown pass in 3 games. He's thrown 6 interceptions. He's fumbled the ball 4 times. He has a 62.5% completion rate over these 3 games, and the Falcons are being outscored in all 3 of those games collectively 75-36.
Wow.
Yikes.
That's tough.
It's really, really hard for me to sit here and not say that the Falcons don't need more from Kirk Cousins. They do. If they want to be a team that, and I tweeted this after the game and I wrote about it in my column.
You wrote about it.
It's my entire column. For the Falcons to be the team that I think we all consider them to be and have the expectations for them to be, Kirk Cousins can't play like what we've seen him play the last 3 games, because where Kirk Cousins goes, this Falcons offense goes. And if he's not leading them to touchdowns, that's an issue and that's a problem. And he said as much. He said, he was like, I'm disappointed in my performance. I need to go back and have a critical eye and look back at this game and figure out what went wrong, why it went wrong. But it's 3 games in a row now where I've been very, very disappointed in the offense as a whole, but also in Kirk Cousins. Where's the Kirk Cousins that did what he did against a very good Tampa Bay secondary in October? Yeah. Where's the guy who led the league in passing yards in October? Where's that guy? If the Falcons don't have that, they don't need that guy all the time, but you need to have a resemblance to that guy. And we haven't seen that in 3 games.
Yeah, Terrin, it feels like we are a long way away from Kirktober.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is now December, so we are a month away from Kirktober, in fact. But I think the one that I stick on more than anything is the 0 touchdowns in the last 3 games. First time in his starting career that he had back-to-back games without a passing touchdown, and now we're at 3 games. And the simple fact of the matter is you cannot win a football game without scoring touchdowns.
And you also
You can. To be fair, you can.
You can. They've done it.
Kickers matter.
But you know what?
That matters more.
They also can't. You can't expect, and Raheem Morris said this, you can't expect to win games when you toss 4 interceptions.
No. What was interesting, though, in the locker room was Drake London was like, I don't blame Kirk. I blame myself more than anything. He took a lot of the fault on the interceptions because he's like, most of them were coming my way.
Yeah,
but I can maybe get on board with being like, oh, like Drake, but like the very, very last one at the end of the game, he did trip.
Yep.
But
that was a play that Derwin James was sitting on that pass. If Drake doesn't slip, at best, I think it's a 50-50 kind of contested ball.
Just adding the locker room insight here, y'all.
I know. This isn't to you and what you're saying. This is just overall. I mean, I think that it.
Let's do a breakdown of the 4 interceptions. So the first one he threw into triple coverage. He was targeting, I believe, Drake on that play, and it looked like he double pumped, kind of threw it a little bit late, and it was such a long pass that Tarheeb Still, who had 2 picks, including a pick 6, which we'll get to here in a second, he had a chance to kind of undercut it and make a good play on the ball. The second one, a 61-yard pick 6 that, Kirk said he was maybe being a little bit too decisive with that throw, that he maybe should have let the play develop a tick longer, because when he decided to throw that ball to the flat, at the same time, it looked like Still decided to sit on kind of the underneath route, and he did have Drake, it looked like, kind of coming open behind Still because he broke down on that flat route to Mooney. So that's another one where Kirk says, maybe I hold on to that ball a second longer, I get it to Drake. Third one, the flow to the back of the end zone, he kind of was trying to throw it up to Drake, overthrew him, kind of a weird play there. And then the fourth one that ended the final drive, Drake slips, Derwin undercuts it, and there you go. That's the story. I mean, you can explain it all day long, but at the end of the day, what matters is what's on the stat sheets that's in all of our hands, because they lost the game.
And what's crazy, though, is even looking at the stat sheet, if you look at what this Falcons offense did in the second half, I mean, I'll just read you the numbers because it was mind-boggling to me. The Falcons lost this game despite holding possession for over 21 minutes in the second half, outgaining the Chargers 222 yards to 42. Atlanta ran 50 plays in the second half to Los Angeles' 17. They ran 17 plays for 42 yards and still won the game. That's, to me, unacceptable. And it all goes back to, again, these darn turnovers. And whereas the last couple of games, it's been, penalties in the red zone, and that's why things are stalling out. Today it was, you're just giving the ball to the other team. Yeah. And you're moving the ball, it's fine, but you're still not clean. You're still not clean.
You might be clean when it comes to the penalties, but the performance itself was not.
Yeah. And I know after the game, it's fair to ask Raheem Morris about the plan at quarterback. And he was asked the plan at quarterback. He was asked, at any point, did you think about pulling Kirk Cousins for Michael Penix Jr.? He said flat out, no, without hesitation. And then asked about moving forward and what the situation would be with Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix, et cetera, et cetera. And what he said, I thought was very interesting, where he again said no. And he said, that guy has carried us. That guy has gotten us to the point where we are 6-6, first place in the division, where we still have everything in front of us despite what happened today. It's up to us to bounce back and find ways to win football games, and there's no better man than 18 to go do that for us. And to that, I say, okay, yes, he has gotten you to the point of being 6-6. I believe you should be better than 500. Yes, you are still first place in the division, and yes, you still do have everything in front of you, but you're not going to have everything in front of you if you don't start winning games.
The vision isn't as clear anymore.
I literally said when we were talking in the press box, it's like, every single time the Falcons have lost a game in the last 3 times out, a little chip, a little bit of their ability to control their own destiny goes away. And at this point, if you're the Falcons, you almost are sitting there looking at the next few run of games with a lot of really good opponents coming up. And in the back of your head, if you're a fan, you may be rooting for more of a Tampa Bay loss than you're rooting for a Falcons win. And that's not the position that the Falcons want to or should be in at this point in the season.
Terrin, is it a good thing that the Falcons, and more importantly, Kirk Cousins, has Minnesota next up on the schedule? Is it a way for him to almost focus on something else other than this game? It's going home. It's going back to the team that he just came from. He's going to be in a building that he has played in many, many times before. So I could see an argument to be made that this is going to reshift Kirk's focus to the next team because it is such an important team for him. And yet, the counterpoint to that could be, is this a little more added pressure for Kirk coming off of this performance? Which way do you fall on that?
I think it's more pressure. I don't know how he views it because
I think he's going to put the pressure on himself regardless after this performance of who, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. I think he's going to take this performance very seriously.
I think the timing of the game is very interesting because the way you phrase everything, part of me wants to be like, oh yeah, it's the perfect time to reset. But they just came off of a bye.
They did.
Yeah.
And a week off wasn't enough to reset and get back on track for the Chargers game. I don't know that going quote unquote home is going to offer that type of reset either, because the emotions are higher. So I go back and forth on that, where it's like it's added pressure, and I don't know that it'll be in a good way.
I think too that Kirk said post game, he was kind of asked about it and whether or not there's something to be made of a player being hot and cold and like having runs and spells of like really, really awesome play, like what you saw him have in October, and really, really down play that you saw him have in the last 3 games. And he said that he doesn't necessarily view it or internalize it in that way. He said he really does kind of feel as if one game is one entity and that bad play can't cycle through to the next game because of all the things that you do between games.
Which I do agree with that. I do think that if you're a player, the week is so long and involved, and like by Wednesday and Thursday, you're so deep into this next opponent that I do think it kind of, there's not enough room in your brain for all of it. Like you got to kind of flush out everything from this past week. Where I do think it matters is when you start seeing some of the same stuff happen in a game. I do think it then becomes very possible for a player, for certainly fans, for coaches to flash back to some of the things that have gone wrong before and say, okay, maybe here we go again, or it's a little bit of a, I've seen this movie before, here's the ending, and you kind of play it out again.
Yeah, I feel a bit differently from like your first part where you said there's just so much happening in the week, you can't help but not flush it. Because in my mind, it's like the moment you put your game uniform on, you're back in that game mindset. And if the last one was a loss, it leaks back in. I mean, I'm not an athlete. Well, I am.
What? Don't.
But I'm not a professional athlete. But I think about like there's a reason runners will wear what they're going to run their race in during their last long run. Because it's what you're comfortable in. And it's like you get used to it. So maybe you'll run, you won't run the race route because the roads are closed. But exactly. So like maybe, I mean, you can't come to Mercedes-Benz on Friday in practice. You could like, if you simulate it like a game, maybe you get a little out earlier. I don't know. But I think there's something to be said about last game bleeding into the next week. Your goal is to not have that happen.
Right.
But it is a completely different mindset when you are in the stadium in your game uniform than when you are in Flowery Branch in your practice uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's no doubt that the team's got to kind of go back to the drawing board on offense. Kirk's got to go back and reset, refocus.
They just came off the bye. That's what's what's tough for me.
That was the thing is like someone asked Kirk post game, they were like, how are you feeling physically? And he was like, I felt as good physically going into this Sunday as I had the entire season.
Yep.
And
he did a QB sneak.
He did.
This man picked up 3 yards on 4th and 1.
I think he got
3rd and 1.
Yeah,
whatever it was.
Yeah, 3 yards on 3rd and 1. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm sitting here feeling that there's this juxtaposition of the Kirk Cousins we saw in October to the Kirk Cousins that we've seen in November. And how do you get back to that guy?
Yeah.
Because he's in there. You
and
know
he's in there. The picks.
And it wasn't just the picks.
He was throwing low passes all day long.
Every single pass, it felt like to Darnell Mooney was at his feet if it did not hop to him before it got to him.
That one on the first drive, if Kirk could have that back and puts it right on Darnell Mooney, it was a great play design. That's a touchdown.
Yeah. And this is a connection we praised in October.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think it was interesting too when Raheem Morris is asked questions about Kirk Cousins, and he said, the Falcons brought Kirk Cousins in this offseason to put the team in a playoff position, to put them in the postseason for the first time since 2017, to win the NFC South. The reason you bring in someone like Kirk Cousins and pay him $180 million in a contract is for all of those reasons.
And it's why they're going to stick by him.
And it's why they're going to stick by him. I know everybody is kind of asking like, oh, Michael Penix, there's $180 million reason why you don't bench Kirk Cousins,
and also Kirktober is another reason.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. We're a month removed from that point in time. Kirk Cousins has it in him.
Yeah,
it's just tapping back into it because you would hope that this past month is the exception to the rule, not the rule itself. Yeah. And I think that's the hope. Now, can that hope become reality? That's the biggest question.
Keep going back to like the reason he's here is for the playoff push. And like he did get them in this position. But if things don't turn around, that hope could be like, that hope slips away, as you said. Like you're chipping away at this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, When I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's. You felt really, really good coming out of that Bucs game.
Yeah.
You know, coming out of Dallas. It was there. You could see the road. I mean, people were starting to talk about what's the earliest you could clinch the division, where like things like that. And then very quickly you see how this NFL can bring you back to reality and force you to look yourself in the mirror. But one group that did look themselves in the mirror was Atlanta's pass rush.
Hey.
Talk about coming off the bye week. Man, they got right. They got right in the best possible way. They had 5 sacks on Sunday, and it's a real shame that, you know, we have to have the conversation in the context of a loss because, I mean, Arnold Ebiketie 2 sacks, David Onyemata got a sack, Kentavious Street got a sack, Caden Ellis got a sack. Even though, you know, I quibble with Grady, maybe should have had a half sack there with Caden. Yeah,
wait, they gave the whole thing to Caden?
They gave the whole thing to Caden. They made a Justin Herbert sandwich, and they only gave the top bun the sack.
I don't like that at all.
Too many sandwich analogies on this podcast.
That's just one sandwich analogy.
But the bottom bun.
Well, that was a previous podcast, but thank you for bringing that back. Old bottom bun Terrin Waack over there. But so a few more things that the defense did well. They held, I mean, you mentioned all the second half numbers. Insane. Held them to 187 yards total. They were the Chargers were 3 of 11 on third down, 0 for 2 in the red zone. They only had 10 first downs, and the defense just gave up 9 points. You know, a touchdown came off of that pick six, and then they got the 2-point conversion. Atlanta's defense, I think, balled out, and it was impressive to see. But, you know, is this pass rush something that you feel confident, Terrin, the Falcons can build off of? Or, you know, are we going to look back at this as maybe the high water mark for the sack totals?
I am going to quote Raheem Morris on this and say, hopefully it's repeatable.
There we go.
And I think that's the key.
That's fair. We had the same conversation coming off of the Dallas game where they had 3 sacks. And they had Dak Prescott under pressure a lot.
3 still wasn't that much, though. That was just a season high to what they were doing.
Comparatively speaking, it was a lot. And it was even more than just sack totals. It was moving him off of his spot. It was making him uncomfortable. It was having him throw the ball away. This was honestly, I think, one of the best performance. Well, it was, I believe, the best performance that we have seen from this defensive front, bar none, all season long. And I would have maybe even said that even if they don't have 6 sacks. If those are just quarterback hurries, I still would have felt that way. If they were just QB pressures, I still would have felt that way. But I will say something that I found to be really interesting about this defensive performance, and I don't think it's interesting, but it's just the fact that it's overshadowed, Will, to your point, like with this entire game. This is the best this defense has looked, I'd argue. And
the numbers prove it.
And we're not able to talk about it because you can't look past the fact that the Falcons are struggling so much offensively to score touchdowns. And that's what's so frustrating. And I think it was even Kirk Cousins said, you know, he was asked about the confidence of the team. And in his answer, he didn't really say anything about the offense, but he had a lot to say about the defense and be like, oh, I feel like the defense should be confident coming out of this game.
They should be.
They should be. Because honestly, they kind of made me eat crow a little bit, because I think I said this past week, I was like, pass rush is not going to change. I was like, you are who you are. This is who you are. And then they go out and have this performance. I'm like, wait a minute. Is this something that they really did take? Like, what all did they do in the bye week? We haven't talked to Jimmy Lake since the bye week started. So I think it'll be interesting to see what things they learned, what adjustments they make. And to Raheem's point and Terrin's point, is this repeatable? Is this something that they can look at and be like, okay, this worked. Here's how we can replicate it. Because I did think it was interesting on the Caden and Grady sack. That felt like more of an elaborate blitz where you had Caden coming up and you had Grady beating his man off the side. You had another guy pulling. And so anyways, I thought that was more of a design sack, but there were a few of these sacks. Kentavious Street, Grady Jarrett, his almost sack in the third quarter or whenever it was, that ended up not being a sack, but Justin Herbert threw it away. Those were more just guys winning their one-on-one matchup.
That's why I think that this can be carried forward, because it felt like the sacks weren't really the result of Justin Herbert like running himself into trouble. It felt like the pressure caused some chaos in the backfield, and then guys were cleaning it up.
Yeah.
And that's something they haven't done a great job of this season is they can generate, one guy can get kind of pressure on the opposing quarterback, but then the other 3 or 4, however many they send, aren't really there to bring them down. Once that pressure is applied, they can usually step up and out or roll out of the pocket or however they want to escape. And today, Justin Herbert did that like a little bit.
Yeah.
But by and large, when he was trying to get away from somebody else, another Falcon was there to clean him up. And so I think that the cohesiveness of the pass rush was really strong today, and I hope that can continue.
Yeah, something else that I'll add to is like, this is why it's so important that someone like Arnold Ebiketie gets more reps. I think the fact you don't like seeing anyone get hurt, that's for sure. But I feel like the reps and the live game action that Arnold Ebiketie got with Lorenzo Carter on IR with a concussion, I think those kind of built up reps, those accumulated reps, only helps someone like Arnold Ebiketie. And I think that this game, and I'll have to go back and watch it to see kind of what those sacks looked like for him and whether or not they were more design scheme wise or if it was him just winning. But I kind of feel like he benefits from that. And you're kind of sort of finally seeing the fruits of that labor, perhaps. And you hope that continues for someone like Arnold Ebiketie, because I did think that he had a good game today.
You spoke to Arnold Ebiketie, Terrin, after the game. Did he say anything that stood out to you?
He said, obviously, anytime you get 2 sacks, it feels good.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. What a quote.
He even had the but. At the end of the day, you still want to get a win. So even the defense is recognizing that the progress that there was is great and all, but the scoreboard ends up mattering most. Well, what was interesting, though, is like he's crediting the bye for a lot of help still. He's like, my legs felt so fresh.
Oh, interesting.
And he also said, like, just self-scouting. It's like we were there. Like the initial rush might not work, but don't give up. Like just keep rushing.
Yeah.
It's like Tori, just keep swimming. Just keep rushing. And he said like the defense just had a really good week of practice of prep. So if they can repeat that, maybe they can repeat the performance. And it was a domino effect because then even Clark Phillips was recognizing how well the defensive line played, and that enabled the secondary to be
what they were. Yeah.
They were looked like they had a real turnover mentality in the secondary. Clark Phillips punched the ball out. I mean, like
Lorenzo Carter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the defense came in with an edge. The defense came in with a goal, and they accomplished that goal against a good Chargers offense. Justin Herbert, we all know who he is. He's a great quarterback.
You can tell the defense had a bye.
Yes,
I think. Yeah, I think that's the big difference.
They looked refreshed and ready. I mean, they played like they weren't feeling the wear and tear of 11 previous games, which is awesome. Somebody else who looked pretty fresh out there, he looked less fresh as the game went along, was Ladd McConkey.
Yeah,
because he just had 9 catches, which is a career high for him, 117 yards. He was really the only nitpick I think you can have for Atlanta's defense, but he was the entire Chargers offense, and he kind of is becoming just the entire Chargers offense. Obviously, people here in Georgia know what Ladd McConkey can do, so I don't think we need to belabor that point. One other note about the defense and special teams, Falcons had another fake punt that they stopped, which I think that's their 3rd on the season. Shout out to Marquise Williams for having those guys prepared and ready to go. And then Younghoe Koo kind of redeemed himself after missing that early field goal. He then connects on 2 more and he makes his extra point. I know, a lot of people are feeling some sort of way about Younghoe Koo. He's going through a rough patch. Tori, was it nice to see him bounce back and make the other 2 after missing that first one?
It was, but you still got to make that first one.
What else? What are you going to say?
No, exactly. Yeah. That's the thing is like, and I even think Raheem Morris said it, like he knows it, we know it, everybody knows it. Like you got to make that. It was a 35-yarder, 34-yarder.
Came into the week with a right hip injury, right? He was,
and I'm sure that played into it a little bit, but
you got to make those.
You got to make those.
Yep, those are points off the board.
Those are things that at the high school level, at the college level, like that's the expectation is you make a 35-yard field goal.
Yeah. And in a game against a good team like this, every point matters.
And it did matter.
An opponent hasn't missed a field goal in Mercedes-Benz.
That's crazy, too.
This season. Okay.
This season.
Yeah. I saw that stat somewhere and I think that's why also it feels like that, not minimizing the misses of Younghoe Koo, because I'm not minimizing that at all. It is interesting though, because it does feel like because opponents haven't missed hardly any field goals at all this year, whether home or away, I think
pressure is on.
It makes it feel even more magnified when Younghoe doesn't make a field goal.
And he probably knows that.
He knows it. Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, let's get to our final topic. What is the Falcons' outlook at this point? They still have the lead in the division as of now. Tampa Bay and Carolina is on the TV in front of us as we speak. Carolina is in the red zone. There's 40 seconds left in the third quarter. They have a 13-10 lead over Tampa Bay. Even if Tampa Bay emerges with a win today against Carolina, the Falcons will be leading the NFC South by virtue of the tiebreaker they have secured against Tampa this season. But this is not the position the Falcons were in 3 weeks ago.
Nope.
The lead is shrinking, and it's shrinking quickly. So, Tori, how do we feel about Atlanta with 5 games remaining?
I think it goes back to something I was saying earlier, where you do have everything in front of you. You know, if they go up to Minnesota next week and beat Minnesota, you feel very differently about their outlook.
Yeah.
If they beat the Raiders on Monday night, you have a different feeling about the outcome. Heck, if they go to Washington right before the season ends and beat the Commanders, with the Commanders rolling the way they are right now, you feel different. So I do believe that there is a true statement that everything is in front of them. If they win some of these big time games, it's going to matter. But if they play the way that they've played against the Saints, the Broncos, and now the Chargers, they're not going to win those games. And that's going to be a problem because, again, to the point I was making earlier, you want to have like control of your own destiny. You want to sit there and have the control and to have your hands on the ball and have possession and all that. I mean, not to use every cliche in the book. You want to be the ones controlling things. And when you're losing games, like the ones that they've just lost these last 3 games, you're not doing that. You're not controlling your own destiny. And you're kind of hoping here the Panthers are at the end of the
TV on in the
literally like the Panthers just scored 16-10 at the end of the third quarter. And if you're the Falcons, you're like kind of breathing a sigh of relief if this thing holds.
Yeah, you used a lot of ifs, right? When you started that, you're saying, if you do this, if you do this. 3-4 weeks ago, we weren't using ifs, right? It was, you are in control, keep it going, play your game, and handle your business, right? And so now as you kind of get to the very end of the season and everything is tightening up, you start to have less and less in your control. Now, fortunately, the Falcons are still in a position where they do control things because of that tiebreak. And I actually disagree with you slightly. I do think that if the Falcons played the way they did against New Orleans and today, that bodes well for them moving forward. They just need to clean up the turnovers, as was the case against the Chargers, and then some of the untimely penalties and giving up explosives against New Orleans.
They didn't play because you have to think about it collectively.
But I'm saying is outside of those areas, I think like if they can finish the job against New Orleans, right, and punch the ball in, and we're playing the if game, but I
thought we just said we weren't playing the if game.
No, I'm in this one scenario. But they were the better team against New Orleans and against Los Angeles. They just didn't win.
But because of the decisions that they made in the game.
No, the decisions are the decisions. Kirk's turnovers aren't decisions.
Yes, they are, fundamentally.
By one player, but the team deserved to win this game. The team dominated this game.
You can't say one without the other, though. You can't say, because of Kirk Cousins' performance.
But spinning it forward, I can say that I think the team played well enough, and I will take this performance from the Falcons, except for one piece.
But that's the game-deciding piece.
You can do that. We are projecting forward. We are projecting out and projecting forward.
I think we are thinking about this in 2 totally different ways. I think that there is like semantics almost like.
Sure. And they're coming entirely from Tori.
Right, entirely from me, of course. But no, because you can't, oh God, I almost pulled
She's flipping the table over.
Yes, like you can say that all day long, but you can't take the totality of the game without taking the bad with the good. So in that case,
what does Raheem say? A growth mindset, right? So I want to keep everything that is working and then just grow like 5% of it. And that 5% is, don't turn the ball over 4 times.
Correct.
And then you win this game.
No, 100%. I agree with that. But it was going against the original argument where you're saying you were disagreeing with me because of the collective.
You're saying if the Falcons play the way they did, which you're right.
Yes.
Because that does include the negatives.
Exactly.
But I think if they play as a team the way that they have, but then fix the couple of issues that popped up against New Orleans and kind of the one main issue today, that I do like that as a path moving forward for success. I think if you keep like 90% of it and then kind of fix the 10% of it, then I do think this team can get back on a roll.
Yeah.
My brain hurts.
Agreed. I think, again, it's semantics. We're not agreeing on semantics here.
Exactly. We're disagreeing on that 10%.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't get involved in that one.
So Terrin's face throughout that whole conversation was like,
what?
I just hope it didn't match the listeners' faces, but if it did, we apologize. So, Terrin, this is kind of a...
Now to me.
Well, this is a little bit of a reversal, I feel like, from what we saw at the beginning of the season from the Falcons, right? They were playing these close games, but they were finding the ways to win. And now they're playing these close games, and they're making the plays that kind of hurt them and cost themselves.
They didn't always find the way to win, though. It was just always close.
You guys are very combative over the last 7 minutes all of a sudden. Oh, my goodness.
This is the reverse of what we saw in some games at the start of the season where they could randomly pull off a victory in the final 2 minutes because they decided to execute well and efficiently in the 2-minute drill.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Something I've been wanting to say that speaks volumes to this entire debate is we have never had a game on the TV while recording this podcast, and that just goes to show the shakiness of the playoff structure that the Falcons stand on right now.
Ooh.
The Coliseum is rocking. I really want to see Gladiator 2.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
Mic drop, honestly. What a note to end on.
All right, let's wrap it there. That will do it for today's podcast. That was obviously not the result the Falcons wanted. They drop 17-13 to the Los Angeles Chargers, now 6-6 on the season. We will see how they can regroup, recollect themselves for a big road game against the Minnesota Vikings. But that is a week away, and we've got a lot between now and then. The Falcons have some things to work on, and we will check back in with y'all on Friday. That will be our preview show. We will look ahead to the Vikings game and kind of recap the week that was for Atlanta. So until then, everybody, for Tori, McElhaney, and Terrin Waack, I am Will McFadden, and we will see you all then.